Welcome to this week's project and a rose paperweight that never should have been made. Originally I was making something completely different, but as things didn't go as planned, this was the result, and I am pretty pleased with it. I upload videos like this every week. If you enjoy them, please consider subscribing and remember to hit that like button. Anyway, here is the story of how this came to be. It all started when I found a dead bee in my living room window, and so I started to think about what I wanted to make with this. What should I do? Cast it in resin or do something else? But in the end I got an idea. I went out in my yard and found a beautiful flower that I was going to join the bee with. I then proceeded to try and find out how to put a bee and a flower together. But as you see, things didn't go exactly like planned, and I managed to rip the bee in two. I still thought I could manage to work around it and glue the bee to the flower, and was thinking that I was only gonna glue the end part of the bee back onto the bee and like nothing ever happened. As you can see, that also didn't work as intended. I never managed to glue it back. But in the end, unfortunately, outside the camera I found a second bee, also dead, from my window, and managed to glue that on to the flower. If you got any tips for me for how I could have fixed the first bee, please comment in below, and I will make sure to read it and reply to you so I can do better next time. I used an old stand from an earlier project and glued a clothespin to it, so I could use that to hold the flower up by its stem when putting it down into the resin. As always, I'm mixing the resin and I'm using slow hardener, so there will be a minimum of bubbles in this project. And I am being careful to pour into the mold very slowly to introduce a minimum of bubbles, which can ruin your project really. Pushing the flower carefully into the resin to not destroy the flower, but as you will see soon, the bee are floating. It floats like a life vest really. So I am having some real struggle to make this project work. Any tips here as well would be appreciated. Please comment below if you have any idea of how I could have done this differently. As you see, I'm just fiddling with the flower and bee to get it right, but in the end the flower encapsulates the bee, and from there on out there are no hopes, and I just have to realize that I've lost and try something different. Since the resin was already poured, I wanted to find some use of it, and luckily for me I had some dried roses laying around, so I decided to use them. I also had an idea to rescue the bee from the old flower and stick it onto this rose. But this was not as easy as I had thought, and also here I ran into some real struggle, as you will see. I actually ended up separating the head of the bee from its body, and from then on out I I just realized that there was no hope, really. I had to give up on the bee completely. Bubbles are always a crucial part when working with clear resin, and to eliminate as much as possible of these, I pour some resin onto the rose like you see here to let the air come out easier, and simply making my job easier later on when I sink the rose down into the resin. And then proceed to lay the rose carefully down into the resin, and I am using the stand to get it in the position that I want. After an hour or so, more bubbles have emerged, so I use a few toothpicks to scrape out the bubbles that are easily accessible. A few hours later, as I mentioned, this is slow setting resin, so you have several hours to work with. I thought that it looked a little simple, so I wanted to add something. I then used one of the other roses, took up the leaves, and as you see, I'm laying them out around the rose to complement it. Okay, so it's been nearly 24 hours since we poured the resin, and although it's gonna be a while more, probably another 24 hours before we can take it out of the mold, I thought I should check how it's going. And you can see here that the resin is starting to settle pretty good. After about 48 hours, the resin had dried and it was time for the reveal. And I have to say, I was pretty pleased with it. It turned out much better than I expected, considering the circumstances. And then the finishing touches. I used a saw to saw off the stem. And I used my belt sander to make it level. So to summarize, this project was a messy one. It started off as something completely different, but it ended up as something I quite like after some last-minute turns. I make videos like this every single week. I upload every weekend, so if you like this video, please consider subscribing and remember to hit that bell icon. A like would also be appreciated. And if you got any questions, any tips, anything, just comment below and I will get back to you. So thank you for watching my video. I will see you next week. Goodbye.